I'm pretty sure I was their biggest fan since the beginning. When I first saw them performing, they were busking in Bristol shopping district. It really is a nice city, and the amount of young, fresh-faced musicians you see on the street adds to its endearing appeal. You'll find all sorts of singers and songwriters trying their luck with the public. One Saturday, I was out with a friend. We were on our way to grab a bite to eat, and there they were. The strangest sight I had seen all day. 3 men busking, something that would have usually been a normal occurrence. I barely even noticed the other 2. The frontman was so uniquely captivating that I stopped in my tracks. I couldn't take my eyes from him. There he stood, playing an acoustic guitar. From his neck downwards, there didn't seem to be anything out of the ordinary about him. Brown boots, cargos, vest, average build. But then there was his head. What looked to be a great, big, white papier-mâché ball. Some sort of gimmick, I thought. Despite that, I found it utterly enthralling. With an accompanying banjo and cajon, the trio sang away. My friend pulled at my arm, but I stayed still, paying an intense attention to the band. The humdrum of a passing group obscured my focus, and I came to. Yeah, sorry, just watching the buskers. I saw a cardboard sign on the floor, written in a thick black marker with the words, Roger Roundhead and the Trashmen. I repeated the name out loud with a childlike curiosity. Fitting name, my friend laughed. Right, I'm starving, should we get going? We went and got some food from the market stands, but still, I couldn't remove the image of Roger Roundhead from my mind. When I later searched their name, I could find little about them. I found it strange that such an interesting performance didn't have an online presence. There were no videos on YouTube and no songs on Spotify, so I decided I had to follow them, to see their music, to have more than a 30-second glimpse. I was hooked. I went to town on my own the following Saturday, in hopes that they'd be busking in the same spot. As luck would have it, they were. Playing the same song that I had heard before, this time I was able to sit down and listen properly to the whole thing. It wasn't even my sort of music, if I'm completely honest. It felt a little too political for my liking, and the rhythms and melodies weren't particularly different to anything I had heard before. If anything, it was a little repetitive. But still, I tried not to blink for fear of missing as much as a second of Roger Roundhead and the Trashmen. Something about Roger unfalteringly drew me in, as if I was being compelled to simply sit and observe him. The song finished, and I looked around. Dotted about were a small number of other people who were equally invested in the group of buskers. After performing only a few songs, Roger Roundhead and the Trashmen packed up their belongings and left. I watched them busk on a number of occasions, and quickly became familiar with all of their songs. Still, I was never able to discover an online presence, until I found out that they would be performing at a small venue called The Fleece. Though it wasn't their own online presence, they were mentioned by another local band. Some friends were fans of them and were already going to the concert. I instantly decided to tag along when the band stated that Roger Roundhead and the Trashmen would be opening for them. Their opening performance was much like their busking performances. It had the exact same format, and they played the same songs. Still, I was unable to turn away from Roger. My friends were divided in opinion. Half of them just wanted the main band to perform, the others were as captivated by the opening act as I was. And so I went on, going to concerts simply because Roger Roundhead and the Trashmen were the opening act. Performing at a number of different venues, I followed them as far as Cardiff. And then they returned to Bristol to perform at the Marble Factory. This time, however, would be their first time as a headlining act. It was a Saturday night, and the place was packed. We stood like sardines, pressed against one another, clambering to reach the front beside the stage. I was lucky enough to get a front row view. I was with 2 of my friends, Will and Theo. They were the ones who were as equally fascinated by the band as I was at that first concert they opened at. When are they going to start? Will anxiously peered onto the stage. I hate it when bands are late. By the time I had looked at Will and looked back to the stage, the Trashmen were positioned ready to perform. Roger Roundhead was yet to show himself. Instead of their usual banjo and cajon, the Trashmen were equipped with a more standard drum kit and bass guitar. As we patiently waited, the smoke filled the stage and the lights dimmed. The blackness gave way to silent excitement. The crowd waited with anticipation. As if to treat us to an appetizer, strobe lights flashed, and shortly after, out emerged that familiar round head, the main course. Like a disco ball, the strobe light seemed to bounce from him. Roger Roundhead brandished a new guitar. Black and white circles rippled outwards sequentially from its centre. Cheers burst from the crowd, but soon were dulled into silence as Roger raised a finger to his round head. Shh. As silence befell the venue, he began to play. The strobe lights flashed in time with the beats, the same riff over and over, the drums rhythmically repeating a backing line, the bass reiterating the guitar's melody. A continuous line, incessant repetition. I found myself mesmerized. I stared at Roger, at his guitar. The circles felt like they were moving. Roger bobbed in time with his playing. The smoke cleared, but the strobe lights pressed onwards with a lightning speed. Then Roger Roundhead began to sing. His voice was masked by numerous strange vocal effects, but it was still distinctly him. Regardless, it was nothing like the music I had heard them play while busking. He swayed his hips forwards and backwards with each note of the rhythm. The distorted vocals droned and took a back seat to the repeating melody. Over and over the notes repeated an enchanting hex, words that I couldn't make out worming their way into my mind. Not of my own volition, I felt myself swaying with the rest of the crowd. Seeds of Roger Roundhead's words planted themselves in my head. I watched them play, waving, swaying, leaning forwards past the barrier that guarded the stage. Roger Roundhead plucked a final note, and we were thrust into darkness. Echoes of light peppered my vision, though never truly lit the way. I called out to my friends, but made no sound. The little lights resonated with my intended vocalizations, seemingly responding to the noise I was trying to make. "Hello?" I didn't say. 2 lights blinked, one after the other. "Who's there?" A flurry of lights flickered and flashed. I spun around in place, watching the strobe orbs that surrounded me. Some were a warm glow of orange that phased in and out of blackness, others a pleasant green that jittered about, and a few were a soothing purple that would rise and sink. I swiveled and stumbled, searching for any indication of what was happening, searching for my friends. I was only met with more lights. As I waded through the glowing waters of the space around me, bioluminescence splashed in place, those little lights bouncing from my body. Like tiny fireflies with no weight, no form, the lights flittered about my person until I stopped moving. "Hello?" I didn't call out again. 2 lights blinked one after the other, again. "Hello!" I tried to shout. The same lights blinked. "What's going on?" The lights formed a line forwards, flashing in sequence. The ripples of a glowing array pointed me in a direction. I followed the path set before me, that seemed to stretch on as far as the eye could see. I trudged along for no longer than 30 seconds, before I began to feel myself lifted up. I spun around, and below me were a series of lights, carrying me upon their formless selves. They raised me further, until I was met with a small circle. Again, more little lights, though this time they were white. I passed through the circle. Passing the threshold, I felt myself accelerating. I saw lights beginning to pass me, faster and faster, until they all formed a single blur around me. I began to shout. Feelings of fear sloshed around and mixed together with adrenaline and ecstasy. Faster, faster, I kept accelerating. A warping, wobbling, winding tunnel formed around me, spiraling smaller and smaller into a thin tube. I reached an unimaginable velocity and passed through the ever-narrowing pinprick exit. A painted world surrounded me, a sky of oils and watercolours, a mixed media painting that splattered and slurried vastly, trickling with wet whites and drying blues. Velvet hills of rolling green with a smattering of flowers waving in time to a familiar rhythm. The music, it played still. Roger Roundhead performed. The lights danced with precise, rhythmic intentions. And at the centre of it all, Roger and his bandmates. I felt my form slip away and watched my body return through the pinprick entrance to this painted world. Sucked violently backwards, it flew. Then there I was, a little green light. Happy, content, and perfectly in time, I danced carelessly and unthinkingly. I spent no longer than an evening enjoying the music and enjoying the company of my shapeless compatriots, before a great typhoon whisked the world up, and a tremendous mash of lights and painted hills were washed away. And there I was, in my body, laid in the same darkness as before. I stood up. I tried to walk forwards again, but tripped over something. I tumbled onto a soft surface, and, as I broke the fall with my hands, I felt that it was a person. I pushed myself back up. I felt shuffling around me. Other people were rising. A confused murmur reverberated around me, and I participated in the crowd's muttering. The venue lights flashed on, and I saw before me an empty stage. A crowd of dazed people wobbled to their feet, and I scanned the room for my friends. I was aware of how thirsty I was, how stuffy the room was. It was hard to breathe, and I could see other people experiencing the same discomfort that I was feeling. Amidst the fray, I did not see my friends, but found my way to the exit. I gasped for air as I fell into a flowing street. The waves of people exiting the building dragged me into the fury of the blistering midday sun. Wasn't it night time? I scratched my head, trying to work out exactly how long the night had lasted, and whether everyone else had experienced what I had. The details of the painted world were fuzzy, fading in and out of my memory. It was like trying to remember a dream. The more I thought of it, the further it slipped away from me. I took my phone from my pocket, intending to check the time. The battery was dead. I took a bus home, grabbed a glass of water, and put my phone on charge. I had 57 missed calls, a plethora of text messages, and was inundated with social media notifications. Are you okay? Where are you? What's going on? Call me, please. Voicemails from my parents and friends, all concerned as to where I was. It wouldn't have been the first time I stayed out all night. It shouldn't have been an issue. Then my mum walked through the door. As soon as she saw me, she ran towards me, hitting me with a whirlwind of emotions, crying, shouting, hugging me, hitting me. When I nonchalantly asked her what the problem was, her jaw was agape. She explained that I had been missing for 3 months. She had reported me missing to the police. My friends had been reported missing too. I was still in a state of confusion, and my mother's babbling words didn't help. I had been gone for an evening, not 3 months. Little anxious ideas raced around in my head, bouncing from wall to wall within my skull. It was possible that I had been spiked with something, and that I was still under the influence of it. I had been gone for an evening. I went to a concert. I hadn't been gone for 3 months. I knew that. But my mother, if it really was her, didn't. I tried to focus, to see if I could wake up from whatever this was, but I couldn't. Roger Roundhead and the Trashmen disappeared. I didn't hear of any more performances by them. It's almost as if they never existed. Maybe they're still in the painted world, but I wouldn't know. Everyone says I was missing for 3 months, and I tell them I don't remember anything. My friends and I agreed to say that whenever anyone asked. But we still talk about that evening amongst ourselves. We have theories about it, but I know that we won't ever come to a solid conclusion. At the end of it all we can do is reminisce, and hope that we can go back, just for an evening.